Welcome back to Around the Services. Long before women were officially signed up for the armed forces as pilots in the 70s, females were flying military aircraft during World War II. As part of our month-long series showing how women moved the military history forward, we bring you the story about the women Air Force service pilots.
Ben has been taking to the skies longer than most of us have been alive.
It never ever occurred to me, one way or another, to even question, do you want to fly? It just never entered my mind.
Back in World War II, Velta and more than 1,000 other women contributed their piloting skills to the war effort.
No precedent had ever been set for these women as to where they would go. So they put us under civil service. And that was it.
The war made pilots a rare commodity. Every male aviator was needed in the combat zone. But still, there were jobs to do back in the States. Women were then called to serve in a way they had never done before. By August of 1943, women Air Force service pilots, or WASP, were in the cockpits of military aircraft.
I never felt that I was doing any more than a girl who was driving an ambulance. We were each doing what we could do best to help our country.
The women trained for 6 months at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, going through many of the same rigors they would have if they were actually in the military. After graduating, the WASP were tasked with ferrying military aircraft closer to the front and testing out newly repaired planes before the aircraft saw action in the combat zone. Some of the women towed targets attached to their planes' tails, not exactly the safest job when the gunners taking aim were in training. All told, 38 WASP would die in the line of duty.
I think we all did it to help with the war effort, and what could be better than to be doing what you love?
The experimental program pitted the WASP against the conventional notion that only men could fly big military aircraft. While these women performed the same job male pilots stationed in the States were doing, Jackie Cochran, the leader of the WASP, always reminded them they were still the fairer sex.
You are going to be under everybody's eyes. You're going to be watched every move you make. And one thing I want you girls should do before you get out of your plane, wherever you are, comb your hair and put on your lipstick and remember you are a lady.
By the time the last class went through in December of 1944, even the top official at the Army Air Corps was a convert.
They exceeded expectations. Hap Arnold said in his last speech, "You have proven you could fly wingtip to wingtip with your brothers." And they did.
But despite the efforts of General Arnold, promises of military status were never realized.
If a man and a woman were flying in a plane in World War II, and one of them was a WASP, and one of them was an Air Force officer, an Army Air Force officer, if that plane went down and they were both killed, he was sent home in a box that the government paid for with an escort. His family was given benefits, and they were able to put a flag on his coffin. She got nothing. Nothing.
I felt like it was something that we were promised, and for my country to go back on a promise, I felt that wasn't fair.
The WASP would spend the next 3 decades fighting for the right to be buried with a flag on their coffin. It wasn't until 1979 that the Air Force retroactively gave the WASP veteran status. More than 30 years after serving, the WASP were granted honorable discharges and the right to be buried like war veterans.
To this day, I feel like that it was both an honor and a privilege to serve my country in that way.
Through those years, WASP went on with their lives far from the spotlight. Some, like Velta, never strayed too far from their first love, flying. She's still an authorized pilot examiner for the FAA.
I don't mind telling my age, but it isn't good for business.
A business that lifted off during a time when most other women's dreams were grounded. Air Force Sergeant Daniela Marcus, Pentagon Channel News.
Those battling for the WASP's rights say they'd like to one day see a memorial in Washington, D.C. dedicated to the WASP. For now, there stands a museum at Avenger Field where they trained more than 60 years ago. And we'll be right back.